Okay, let's unpack this. I read that over half of Americans, something like 51% from a 2015 study, are absolutely terrified of sharks.
Yeah, it's a really striking number, isn't it?
It really is. And that brings us straight to our topic today, Galeophobia.
Hmm.
We've done a deep dive into, well, all sorts of sources. We've got medical definitions, psychological perspectives, how the media handles sharks, even conservation
The
viewpoints.
real Vix.
Exactly. So the mission here is to try and understand this fear, where it stems from and maybe what the real relationship is between humans and sharks. Because with a fear that widespread, where do you even start?
Well, the name itself is a good starting point, I think. Galeophobia.
Right.
It's straight from Greek. You've got galeos, that means shark, and phobia, which is fear.
Makes sense.
And medically speaking, this isn't just like a mild dislike. It's actually a diagnosable thing using the DSM-5 criteria.
So a recognized condition.
Yeah, it means there's a significant fear or anxiety, specifically about sharks, that genuinely gets in the way of someone's daily life.
And like you said, that statistic, over half of Americans saying they're absolutely terrified, it just shows how common this feeling is.
It really does.
Yeah, it's clearly more than just someone saying, oh, I'd rather not swim with a great white. This is like a deep-seated fear for many people.
Definitely.
Now, you'd probably guess it's all down to, Jaws and scary news headlines, but our sources hint it might be older than that.
That's a really interesting angle.
All right.
There's definitely a line of thought that galeophobia isn't just something cooked up by Hollywood recently.
Okay.
Some researchers think it could actually be a primal human instinct, something that maybe developed over hundreds of thousands of years.
For survival, you mean?
Exactly. Think about early humans, avoiding big predators, including ones in the water,
Yeah.
crossing rivers, being near coasts that would have been pretty crucial for staying alive.
Huh. So a fear of sharks might actually be wired in a way.
Potentially, yeah.
Huh.
A kind of evolutionary hangover, perhaps.
That does make a certain kind of, well, primal sense. And let's face it, when people who have this phobia describe sharks, especially great whites, it's intense.
Oh, yeah.
Words like diabolical, gruesome, terrifying. I mean, those teeth, the jaws, they definitely play a part in that fear image.
Undeniably. Those physical features are very powerful visually. They tap into something quite basic about danger.
And then there's the territory thing, too.
Yeah, that comes up as well. This feeling that sharks are sort of encroaching on our space. Beaches, places people fish. It adds another layer of anxiety.
But, okay, here's the bit that always gets me, the actual statistics. The chance of being attacked by a shark is tiny, right?
Incredibly low. It's almost vanishingly small. There was a PETA study, I think from 2018.
I saw that one mentioned.
Yeah, it pointed out that in just that 1 year, humans killed roughly 100 million sharks.
100 million.
Yeah, were sharks. They caused 5 human deaths worldwide.
5! The difference is just, it's astronomical.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that massive gap between the statistical reality and how we perceive the threat, that's kind of textbook for understanding phobias, really.
Our brains are just wired to react strongly to perceived danger.
That fight or flight response kicks in. It's an automatic thing designed to react to what we think is a threat, even if the actual risk level is, minimal.
And with Galeophobia, that response is just dialed way up for sharks.
Exactly. It's fascinating how it manifests.
So if someone is actually experiencing this phobia, what does that feel like? Physically? Emotionally?
Well, the symptoms could be pretty severe. Yeah. You're looking at classic anxiety responses like a really fast heartbeat, feeling short of breath.
Shaking?
Yeah, shaking, trembling, sometimes hyperventilating, even feeling sick or dizzy.
Wow.
But it often goes beyond that. People with galeophobia might feel this intense anxiety, like they're losing control. It can cause insomnia, nightmares.
And this can be triggered just by thinking about a shark or seeing a picture.
Absolutely. The thought, an image, or obviously seeing one for real. And it can get to the point where even just looking at a large body of water, an ocean, a lake, can trigger significant fear, even panic.
That sounds incredibly limiting.
It can be. And for it to be diagnosed clinically, these symptoms usually need to have been going on for at least 6 months.
6 months. Okay, so if someone is dealing with this, what help is available? What are the treatments?
Well, good news is there are effective treatments. One key approach is called exposure and response therapy.
Exposure therapy, like gradually facing the fear.
Pretty much. It involves being gradually and safely introduced to shark-related things, pictures, videos, maybe eventually visiting an aquarium. The idea is to lessen the fear response and avoidance over time.
Okay.
And then there's cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. That's also really important.
How does CBT work for this?
It focuses more on identifying the negative thought patterns behind the fear and then working to change them, challenging those automatic scary thoughts about sharks.
Makes sense. Are there other things, like medication?
Sometimes things like hypnotherapy are explored, or medication might be used, usually alongside therapy, maybe to help manage severe anxiety symptoms. But generally, exposure therapy and CBT are seen as the main recommended treatments.
Right. It's good to know there are solid options. Now let's pivot slightly, because another big part of the sources we looked at comes from marine biologists, animal rights folks.
The shark advocates.
Yeah. And they argue really strongly that sharks are just fundamentally misunderstood.
They really do. And one amazing point they often make is just how ancient these creatures are.
Oh, yeah.
Sharks are basically living fossils. The fossil records suggest they've been around for something like 450 million years.
Wow. That's hard to even comprehend.
Isn't it? And over that time, they've diversified into over 500 different species. They're not all giant great whites, you know.
Right. Lots of different types, different diets.
Exactly. Many eat mostly fish. Some larger ones do prey on marine mammals. But the key takeaway from the scientific side is that humans are really not on the typical shark menu. That whole man-eater idea just isn't supported by the evidence.
So when attacks do happen, which is super rare, it might not be what we think.
That's what a lot of research suggests. It might be a case of mistaken identity, especially with surfers. A shark sees a silhouette from below.
Looks like a seal or something.
Potentially. Or it could even be simple curiosity, an exploratory bite, which, unfortunately, given their power, can still be devastating. But it's likely not driven by this targeted malice that people often imagine.
That's a really important distinction. It changes the narrative completely.
It does. And then you put it against those human impact numbers, again, that 100 million gill by us in a year.
Yeah, it flips the script entirely. We are overwhelmingly the bigger threat.
Without a doubt. Which brings us to the whole issue of shark culling.
Right, these government programs to deliberately hunt and kill sharks near beaches. That sounds controversial.
It's extremely. And marine conservationists are pretty unified in arguing that it's, well, misguided and just doesn't work.
No evidence it actually reduces attacks.
Nope. There's really no solid scientific proof that culling makes beaches safer for humans. And on the flip side, it can seriously mess up the marine ecosystem.
But these programs still exist in some places.
They do. And you have to think that the negative public perception, that fear we've been talking about, probably plays a role in allowing them to continue.
So we've got this fear, maybe partly primal, definitely fueled by how sharks look, but the stats don't back it up. And culling seems ineffective, which really throws the spotlight onto the media, doesn't it?
Oh, hugely. This is where things get really interesting in terms of how the fear got amplified.
So while the fear might be ancient, the intensity of it, the public awareness, that's more recent.
Yeah, sources suggest a real shift started happening around the 1960s and 70s. Things were bubbling up. And then
came Jaws.
1975. That movie was just a cultural atom bomb, wasn't it?
Totally. It basically created the modern image of the shark as this, like, relentless killing machine. A huge box office hit. Everyone saw it. Everyone talked about it.
It really did. And scientists actually talk about the Jaws effect.
The Jaws effect.
Yeah, it describes this irrational fear people developed of sharks intentionally hunting humans. The film portrayed them as these vengeful monsters.
Which isn't accurate at all, based on what we know.
Not at all, but that image stuck.
Yeah.
And you hear it all the time from people with Galeophobia. Phobia specialists say patients often point directly to seeing Jaws as the origin point for their fear.
Especially if they haven't had any actual encounters with sharks themselves.
Exactly. Their main reference point is the movie.
Which makes it almost poignant, I guess, that both the author, Peter Benchley, and the director, Steven Spielberg, later said they regretted the negative impact the film had.
Yeah, they both expressed remorse about how it fueled fear and contributed to the decline in shark populations because people became so scared of them.
It just shows the power of stories, doesn't it?
Immense power. And it wasn't just movies. Television has played a part too. Even something like Shark Week.
Oh, interesting. Because you think of that as educational, maybe.
Well, it often does have conservation messages mixed in, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be honest, a lot of the time the programming seems geared towards, maximum entertainment value.
Sensationalism.
Yeah, stoking fear, dramatic titles, scary music, focusing on the rare attack stories. Sometimes the science and the real conservation issues can get a bit lost in the hype.
And regular news coverage, too, I imagine. A shark bite is big news.
Definitely. Even though attacks are statistically rare, when one happens, it gets amplified. Local news, national news.
Makes it seem like it's happening all the time.
Exactly. It creates this inflated sense of risk for anyone going near the water. And one study we saw found like over half of newspaper articles about sharks were focused just on bites.
And very few mention conservation.
A tiny percentage, yeah. So the dominant narrative in the news is often just about the perceived danger.
So that constant drip feed of scary stories, even if infrequent, really shapes how we see them.
It feeds right into any existing anxiety. And there's one more piece here from psychology. Research by Gabriella Hancock. She's with the Shark Lab at Cal State Long Beach.
Okay.
Her work looked at babies, actually, 5-month-olds. And they found these infants showed no fear response to sharks at all.
No fear, so it's not innate.
It suggests not. It points towards the idea that the fear of sharks is actually something we learn.
Learned from culture, from media, from stories.
Plausibly, yeah. Which is kind of hopeful, in a way. If it's learned, maybe it can be unlearned, or at least managed with better information.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. Bringing all these threads together, the main takeaway seems pretty clear, right?
I think so. It feels like.
Yeah.
Yes, Galeophobia is absolutely a real thing. It's a powerful phobia, can have deep roots, and the media certainly doesn't help, often making it worse.
Right.
But the actual statistical risk that sharks pose to us humans is incredibly, incredibly low.
And flip that around.
And we pose a vastly, enormously greater threat to them.
Right. That feels like the core message from this deep dive.
Definitely. Which leads us, I suppose, to a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
Given everything we've discussed, the reality of shark behavior versus the media hype, the learned nature of the fear, how can we maybe start to shift our own perspectives?
From just fear to something else.
Yeah. Can we move towards a more informed understanding? Maybe even appreciation for these creatures that are, let's face it, ancient and really important for ocean health.
And what's our role in that?
Exactly. What responsibility do we have, maybe, to challenge the scary stories when we hear them? And perhaps to support efforts to protect sharks, rather than fear them.
Lots to think about there. Definitely something to mull over after listening.